Hello everyone, we're a half Chinese Brit and a Siberian Russian living in China. We use our unique perspectives to demystify and translate Chinese culture and lifestyle. My name is Lucien.
And my name is Artem. We are entrepreneurs who made it in China, and now we are sharing our experience with you. And if you want to know more about our careers and China stories, how we got there, so you could listen to our pilot episode where we talked about why China, why not China. We got pretty good feedback before. But today we will talk about the topic we should talk long time ago.
Yeah, I think it's really high time that we talked about this topic. And it's of course about the coronavirus, right? And the China experience of the coronavirus. And we're asking ourselves, will the world really never be the same? Is there really a new normal? And how will China fit into that? And how did China come through it?
Why the world's still fighting against coronavirus? China, we are in the future here in China, and I'm getting a lot of direct messages from friends and some of them entrepreneurs from different industries. They want to know more about China experience, how we survived, how businesses survived, or how businesses died. How it's going back to normal. What is new normal? Because we live in this new normal now, right?
Okay, so Artem, what is your opinion on the statement that the world will never be the same?
I don't think so. The thing is, what we can see now in China is nothing back. All is back to normal, and it's not new normal. And people just wearing masks. Is it a new normal? It's changed the world totally. Clubs are full of people, metro full of people, traffic jams, people traveling, people go to restaurants, and no any social distancing actually. So almost all back to normal.
Okay, I think that's a very interesting perspective. Okay, fine. Let's give a little background on the coronavirus then. I'm sure that everyone knows, but of course it originated in Wuhan around November, December time, and it really exploded in January. And
you said, of course.
Okay, fine.
No, it's your point of view, but still no any 100% evidence of this.
Well, this is almost another topic entirely, but it's so interesting seeing the narratives coming both from domestic media as well as international media, the conspiracy theories, the idea that perhaps it was built by American soldiers who'd transported it over here, or Americans accusing the Chinese of building the super virus in a lab in Wuhan. And it's really interesting that everything and anything can become politicized, and there's always a scapegoat. There's always a winner, there's always a loser. Quite aside from the obvious winners and losers, there's that political narrative at all times. It's been a really interesting thing to see.
Okay, if we go back to highlights of coronavirus epidemic in China, so it started in January. Everyone realized how tough is it in January. I remember myself till till January 20th. I think I was it's Wuhan thing. Shanghai is a big city, is a good hygiene here, is always good, and it's not about us. And then it comes, and it was quite serious the whole February. But actually, in the end of February, we already back to the offices with some restrictions, with a lot of measures. But I remember around after St. Valentine's Day, I think February 15th or something, we back to offices.
Yeah, around that time, I think in many ways things were starting to get back to normal in terms of regulations. But it was very interesting to see how people were reacting. A lot of people, they didn't want to come out.
Yeah.
Right, even though they're allowed to.
Yeah.
Right, and particularly the first 2 weeks of the office being open, the security guards, they're very strict. They're wearing hazmat suits. Yeah. It was like a scene out of a film, right?
Yeah.
And they're really checking where you'd been the last few days and checking your details and that kind of thing. And then within a couple of weeks, it had just become a formality.
Yeah.
Right? They weren't really checking. They were just doing it to do it.
Yeah, and many my Chinese friends and foreigners actually, they even offices opened. The employees, they can stay at home and work at home because like everyone understand it was so unpredictable situation. Everyone was thinking about the second wave because like when coronavirus in China started, it was Chinese New Year, and Chinese New Year everyone back home, and like big cities like Shanghai and Beijing was like almost empty. So and everyone was scared about when whole people go back and offices open, maybe it will be the second new wave.
Yeah, I think actually it was a good thing that it was the Chinese New Year, because traditionally people go back to their home villages, right? So it's very easy to kind of track where everyone is going. Whereas with other big holidays, people are flying all over the world. And that's very difficult to track. So in a way, it was almost a blessing that it was kind of contained within China and within several certain cities.
Yeah, and it's happened before Chinese New Year, like 2 weeks before, I mean, like the big outbreak. So it was really a good thing. Not good thing for factories, so for measures, because many things was closed for holidays and factory like workers go back home. That's why many Chinese factories cannot back to work so fast, to work on like masks, to work on another medical equipment, When people realize that the second wave is not coming and offices are opened, like more people in metro, more people like in cafes, McDonald's is open. I mean, like clubs was closed there at the time, but many restaurants and cafes starting to open with the restrictions again. And many shopping malls was working like till 8 p.m. only or something like this, And even in March, they already opened some parks. And some like attraction was like opened, but with the limited people can come in.
So I think what's really interesting for me is seeing the way that people have really reacted to the virus. So some of my friends have been very terrified, and they're really not willing to leave the house, right? Even up until kind of April, May. And then you also see some bits of news, like I think it was March or April, where the weather was really good in Hangzhou, and the Westlake scenic area, which is beautiful, it was like mobbed by locals because it was such a beautiful day and it was a weekend, and these people they'd been trapped at home for literally like 1 or 2 months. That was really interesting to see how people react differently. And I think the general narrative is that people here, they listen to the government, and they all care about everyone else's safety, but at the same time, ultimately we are still human, right? And we still do want to go to the park, we still do want the sunshine, we still do want to be free.
And like Huangshan, one of the most important mountain in terms of Buddhism, Taoism in China, many people went there to it's not tourist attraction. For this sweeping day, you need to go to such places. How to say
to pay your respects to your ancestors.
Yeah, and there are more special places for this, like Huangshan. And the first day it was crowded as fuck. I don't know. I saw that photo, so what the fuck is wrong with people? Why they go there? And then on the second day, local government realized that was mistake, and then stopped and limit people again because it was too much. Yeah. I mean, they even don't expect that many people will come for that.
Yeah. I think that's ultimately it, right? I think there is no one narrative of all Chinese people are this way or all Italian people are this way. People are all different. I think we've given a pretty good timeline of the virus. Let me ask you very directly then, how was your business affected? And by what point did you start to feel business was coming back?
We have survived. That's the main thing, right? It's like June, almost July, and we are still okay. Our business is not that. That's a good thing. But I don't think all is coming back for us. Because we do international business. The first and the main income source of income is China company, which manufacturing and supplying. For us it was we was prepared well for 1 month without any production because it was Chinese New Year. So factories don't work like almost for 1 month. But then it become like 2 months, even more than 2 months. So for sure it's important for us because we are getting our commission when we ship the things. Then China started back to normal. They start to work, factories start to produce things. They even finished some orders. And then our foreign customers, they don't need this because like it start a huge epidemic outside. The US, Russia, European customer, they say, please not now, after epidemic is over, we are like fucked up now here. Oh, we cannot pay or something like this, you know. So for us, it's still happening. I mean, like in US, you know, this week it was like maximum one day, 40,000 people, new cases. That's a lot. I mean, like it's even not peak there. I don't know. It's so people only thinking they're about surviving. I mean, like surviving with their businesses, with their families, whatever. So they're not thinking about how can I get my order from China if it's not masks, you know, or like medical equipment, some necessary things. So for this business, we are still not back to normal. For Lao Wai Mi, it's our souvenirs and gifts related to China. And you know, like when it's coronavirus started, and we have these Chinese New Year boxes, and no one wants this. Like they refund in February. All people who bought it, I want refund. I don't receive any box from China. And I sent them link for WHO that like it's safe to get parcels from China. They don't trust. They just I don't need it, you know. So and most of the foreigners who like another part of our customers here in China, they left China. So we was like fucked up totally. Only this month it started back to normal a bit, and we're getting some orders. But the thing is, it takes now like before it was 2 weeks, now it's 1 month, even 3 months to get the parcels. It's shipped very fast from China. But there is like huge lines on like in the US, in Europe, because like this coronavirus thing really influenced all industries a lot. And people start to buy a lot of online. They don't go offline. That's why I mean like it's too many parcels.
Okay. So supply chains are really clogged up then.
Yep.
Right. All over the world.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
the only one thing which is good, I mean, like we have a media outlet about China, so it was a lot of attention to China recently, and we keep doing content a lot, and that's why we actually also launched the new podcast, and we launched YouTube project with my friend William, and now I'm launching my own YouTube channel for Russian audience. So we use this like opportunity. We got some time because we lost a lot of customers, and I have time now. So I think like investment in content marketing is the best now.
Okay.
It's huge monologue about business. I'm like, you know, like huge conglomerate company group.
Business
like,
empire, right?
Yeah, we survived. This is a good thing. So what about your business? I know like most of your customers are like hotels and companies from travel industry, and this industry is obviously fucked up in this time.
So I own a PR agency. We help local and global brands grow in the China market. We made a very deliberate decision last year to pivot towards travel and tourism, which back then seemed like a very smart idea because the China travel market was fantastic, right? Chinese people love to travel. And then of course this was the industry that was hit hardest by the virus. So we were okay still though, because we do a lot of online stuff for clients. So even though we do offline events and PR and media stuff, that all got cancelled, but we still had some revenue coming in from online, and that was great. But we lost a few of those clients because, as I say, they were running out of money. And the first thing that gets cut is always the marketing budget, right? Then after that, we started to feel during March and April, we were taking a lot of meetings with potential clients because they were desperate to start spending again. They had these budgets that they'd set out from last year, and they had nowhere to spend, right? And they needed to start earning for 2020. And so they were thinking of brand new innovative ways to reach those customers again. So we saw a lot of people come towards us asking us for online solutions, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's WeChat, how to build these kind of channels that they can grab people from online and sell them products online to offline.
As I see, like your company's income reduced like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So how you survived? What did you do? What is like risk management? What did you cut? What budget?
One of the things that we did was actually leave our office. That was an interesting one because actually the government was pushing a lot of office spaces to give companies free rent for 2 months. We were both at WeWork, and unfortunately they didn't give us free rent. And of course, when we're in the middle of this huge crisis, a lot of companies could not afford to pay rent. So they made the transition, as we did, to working from home. And I think that's had a really bad rebound effect for offices because now a lot of companies know that actually they can work from home. They don't need an office. So that's one of the things we cut. Other things I tried not to cut because I'd saved a lot of money from previously. I was still able to pay employees, which perhaps in hindsight from a financial point of view was not the right thing to do. I think morally it was the right thing to do because, you know, these people, they rely on me. I had to tighten my belt, as they say, right? So I cut my own costs significantly, but I managed to keep paying the staff. And I think for me, I'm pretty satisfied with that.
I left office in Shanghai because like we have main office in Shenzhen.
Mm.
So here it was like only representative office, but the main office and warehouse all was in Shenzhen. It's still in Shenzhen. Actually in Shenzhen, from the landlord, we got like 50% discount for March office, which is really good. And we reduced 20% salary for 2 months for our staff, which is like according to the Chinese law. It was you cannot pay less than 80%, but yeah, you can pay like 20% in epidemic time. And yeah, I moved our warehouse from Shenzhen to Shaoxing. It's a city in Zhejiang, close to Hangzhou. So, and I got like free office from my friend there. And so like we used any opportunities to cut our costs actually, because really even now we maybe like epidemic will be over soon in the world, but no one knows what about like economic crisis, which is like really could be go after that. So we're preparing and saving money as soon as possible because this year and the next year probably will be really tough.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. I think that's also part of the reason that we started doing this podcast, right? We had a lot more time. Our company personally, we started investing a lot more time on LinkedIn, and we found that we had a lot more time to start doing content, start doing marketing, and just give out good information, good stories to people, so that hopefully by the time we come back and they come back for business, we're in their minds.
So what makes China so efficient to fight against coronavirus?
Well, I think one of the huge things is the government support. Lots of incentives, lots of grants. They're really pushing hard on landlords to give free rent, for example. One of the big things is that this year we're only paying 1% corporate tax. But actually, that's only useful if you survived to now. Because if you didn't survive, you wouldn't be a beneficiary of any of these grants or subsidies. One of the other things that I think has been very important, I know that Artem said we shouldn't get into politics, but again, being a very organized society where people understand that society is greater than the individual, there is a lot of emphasis on keeping the peace, making sure that everyone is safe, and listening to government notifications, so staying indoors, staying safe, staying clean, this kind of thing.
So it's not about politics only, it's more about society. I think like it's, yes, you can say that Chinese people don't give a fuck about other people in terms of like daily life, because like, I mean like older generation probably like this splitting, or I don't know, just listening very loud your music on your phone, like, and just don't give a fuck about people around you. But when in terms of like really danger, or like when it's a threat for whole country, for the nation, they could be responsible.
Civic minded, right?
Yeah. So in this case, they stayed at home, and when it just started, I didn't realize how serious it is. I was like just going out to enjoy like empty bund, for example. I just went out there and post some moments on my WeChat, like short videos, and my Chinese friends, like, if you go out, just like don't post it, okay, or just stay at home, please, because we all stay at home. You don't need to go out. And there's like, it was like self-regulation. It was like, in Shanghai we didn't have this quarantine strict as like in Russia or US, when you got fines when you go out something. It was like you can go out at any time. Many places was closed, but you can go out on the street. But no one went. And I have even Shanghai was not red area or something. Was not that bad here. And many of my Chinese friends like stayed at home by themselves for 1 month or 2 months. They didn't go out.
I think that was really interesting. I was really surprised that people didn't have more cabin fever. Like, at least in England or Russia, most people live in houses, so they have a garden.
Yeah.
Right, so you can get out. But
Not
here,
in Russia.
okay, sorry. But here in China, definitely within cities, everyone lives in a high-rise apartment, right? So your world is like confined to these 4 walls. I think people must have been going crazy. I know I was, right? I live next to the Bund, so I was able to like go for runs and stuff, particularly at night, because partly it was, for me, it wasn't just about being worried about my own safety. It was also giving a good impression to other people. I didn't want to be that foreigner who's like going wild and like being out in the streets or not wearing a mask or going in the metro without a mask, because we have a reputation that we have to uphold because we're representing all foreigners here. So anyway, whenever a disaster happens, there is always this scapegoat mentality. And originally it was people from Wuhan, and then it became foreigners, and the narrative is very interesting to watch.
That's also because of this media war, because US and the Western countries start to blame China about this thing. What do you do to protect yourself? For sure, like, you start to attack it also. So China start also to join this media war. And for sure, for them, it's the best thing is just like to show, look at this, look how bad epidemic is there. We was fighting against coronavirus for 2 months, and you guys, you had so much time to prepare, and you didn't prepare at all. So now the whole world epidemic is like to blame you, not only us. It was like this kind of thing. And the thing, there was like, look, all foreigners like now potential disease owners. How to say disease owners?
Disease carriers.
Carriers, yeah. So, and that time, it was a few weeks when I also felt this thing on myself. I cannot call it racism, but it was like people was really scared about, because like brainwashed by media outlets. And then, for example, even in metro, there was an old guy, also Lawai, foreigner guy, who went out from me to another side of a car, and there was like even more people, but that people were all Chinese people. So he avoided me because like that time was about like all Italy so bad, US so bad, and I mean like the situation there. And that time China just closed their borders, so potentially there probably was some people who come here, potentially. But 95% of import cases was brought by Chinese people. But media didn't tell this. They didn't mention this. They call it imported cases. And when Chinese hear imported cases, for sure it's about foreigners,
Sure.
So it was quite smart, brainwashing trick.
One thing that was very, very interesting for me is this gap of speed of policy and the reality. So in the sense of, before they closed the borders and before they imposed a 14-day quarantine, actually people could come back, they could get tested at the airport, and they could go straight back to their houses in Shanghai or wherever, and then they could resume normal life. I think they had to do like a 1 week like self-imposed quarantine, but there was nothing like mandatory, right? And then it became, you came to the airport and then you were put into a hotel by the government and you had to stay there quarantined. So there was this gap of time where people could just come in, right, and do whatever they wanted. And then even though everyone knew it was a problem, the policy didn't get enforced for at least 2 weeks. What the virus has really taught me is that big corporates, big governments God, we're all just so fragile,
Yeah.
right?
And they can change all things very fast.
And they can change everything very quickly.
Even in Shanghai, I was really surprised. This is like one of the most international city in the whole Asia. It's one of the always on the top rating for expats in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was moving to new apartment at this time, like in March and April, and many compounds just don't let me come in. Even when they was opened for any like guests, but for Chinese people, when they see white guy, they just like, I went for a dinner to my Chinese friend with another Chinese friends who didn't live there in that compound. And they like, okay, you go. I said like, but they don't live there. They are also guests, the same as me. And then I showed them my health QR code and like my even air tickets when I just come back in late December. So I didn't go out of China for 3 months, and like I'm here in Shanghai and it doesn't work. They say no, without any reason. Like 为什么? 没为什么? It's like why? No why?
But I think that is. One, it's always been foreigners always like a problem or not. Well, I think that is a separate issue that's been extended because for foreigners to do things in China has always been a little bit more difficult than for locals, right? More paperwork. So here it's like eliminating that risk, whereas before the virus, it was worth going through the extra paperwork for a customer, even if they're a foreigner. Now the risk is too high because what if, right? I think China has always been a very what if kind of culture, right? Particularly in terms of governance and regulations, it's always about safety. Safety is paramount.
Yeah, and
that's very important.
Don't take responsibility.
Don't take risks, and so you don't have to take responsibility. The other thing that I think was interesting about what you said is that it's not just about being a foreigner. It's about anywhere in China, right? So you hear stories about people from Wuhan really, really being discriminated against.
Yeah, even more than us.
Way super badly. And there are videos of when the Beijing government announced that people from Wuhan and that province, Hubei, were allowed out to other cities to go back to work and stuff again. There were riots on the borders of that province from other provinces who didn't want to let them in.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not just about foreigners. It's like every people in China has been affected. Actually, I met a girl from Wuhan the other day, right? She's a friend of a friend. And, we just got chatting. I was like, oh, so where are you from? And she was like, oh, I'm from Wuhan, but I haven't been there in ages. Don't worry. So even without me saying anything, she's already trying to comfort me and make me not worry about where she's from, right? So actually thinking from her perspective, I think it must be really tough for people from Wuhan because they have this real stigma attached to them.
So actually I agree, yes. That's why I said from the start it's not about racism. Even I posted first about racism, but then I realized that Wuhan people treat it even worse than us. But let's go talk about back to normal. We talked about how it was during epidemic, and there were a lot of actual media write a lot of materials about this. But there is not that many about back to normal. So how do you feel in back to normal? We started to talk about if anything changed, and I don't see a lot of things change. Just we go points by points. For example, office work. What's changed? If really a lot of companies start to be remote, if they work remote, I don't see this. I think most of the traditional sectors, industries, they're back to offices. And it's deep in Chinese culture. I think Chinese like to kaihui. They like to have meetings. They like to drink tea with the customers, with their managers, with their teams. They love team buildings. Oh my God. They love to Lao Ban, the boss. They love to see their people,
Mm-hmm. I think you're completely right. With the office work side, I think what's interesting is actually the office itself. It's almost a little bit perfunctory. So, for example, our office building that we used to be in before, there's 5,000 people in that building. So the security guards downstairs, they temperature check 5,000 people a day, coming in and out, lunchtime, in and out, whatever. So that's probably, let's say, 10,000 people that they have to check every day. Multiplied over 3 months. By this point, they're not even looking at the thermometer, right? they barely even press the button. They just wave it over you as you walk in, because how can a human being have that much attention span to have, checked the temperature of literally hundreds of thousands of people?
It's few cases, but still, like the thing is, if you have high temperature, they don't let you go in, and this is like go to hospital. That's it. And like QR codes, I mean, like they still ask in some places for health QR code. And actually, this is one more reason we didn't take what helped China to fight with coronavirus. The people like already digitalized. Everyone have WeChat. Everyone has doesn't have cash, which very important, like in terms of virus spread, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't touch anything. And here, like QR codes, and it's even better than Apple Pay. You can like scan QR code on 3-5 meters, and many shops, when it was like outbreak, they even put some like distant thing, and they give you Starbucks also. They don't communicate with you at all. Like you don't come close. They put your order on some table, so it's totally like no any contact.
Isolated. Yeah.
Chinese Waimai food delivery is the most developed in the world. That's why it was also easy for Chinese people to stay at home. And the minimum order is super low. You can like order for 8 RMB, like which is $1, and they will bring it to you.
They'll still deliver it,
because like China already digitalized. That's what helped to create these like QR codes on Alipay or WeChat basis. Very easy, because like they have all your data.
And I think that works very well into our next topic that we're talking about, which is cafes, restaurant, bars, and clubs, right?
Yeah.
Where
how they back to normal and how they survived.
So restaurants and cafes, like you said, already they were always doing delivery anyway. Actually, there are some restaurants that I know of that are delivery only. They don't even have like a space for people to sit. They're just a kitchen and some delivery people. So that was already the infrastructure before the virus. And so we were very well placed to go forward. Bars and clubs, that's an interesting one, because, the point of being in a bar or a club is to be social, be around each other, drink. And
I saw a few of them made this like online parties, where DJ was playing in the empty bar, and then people at home, they had parties. But it's the same for all the world, right?
Yeah. Actually, one of the really interesting things about what you said about live streaming is this very famous club in Shanghai called Tax. And they were doing live streaming. And because on live streaming, you can actually get donations, they were making loads of cash for 1 or 2 days. And then because they're doing so well and attracting so much attention, they actually got shut down by the authorities.
Really?
Yeah. for I guess, not being a very positive outlook or something like that.
And many bars actually start to sell like special, their cocktails. Like their signature cocktails in a special bottles, like with a good delivery. So like, you're getting your drink almost like in the same condition like you're going to the bar, because you also go to the bar for like good cocktails sometimes. For many Russian businesses, it was tough because delivery is not that developed yet. And to go online is really hard for any businesses when you're like offline business and you suddenly want to make all online.
I think that's the same for a lot of places outside of China, like England, especially places where labor costs are very high, right? In England, delivery is like, it's at least a few pounds to get something delivered. It's a lot, right? And so labor costs in China are just so low. The infrastructure for delivery is there.
No, but what about now? Cafe restaurants are full. If you go to Found, the most famous bar street in Shanghai, and it's like really full of people. It's crowded. Yeah. It's almost back to normal. I mean, like I think maybe even more crazy because people like they're tired about crisis and they want to go out and they think
it's a funny kind of situation where like to get into somewhere you have to wear a mask.
Yeah.
Be wearing the mask as you walk through the door, but as soon as you're through, you take it off.
Yes,
right.
So
it's the same with offices, malls, nightclubs, everywhere.
And especially for restaurants, like you come there to eat.
Of course, you have to take it off.
to put it in your mouth, So it's all about like formality.
Then going on to events. Well, events is a tough one because there are a lot of events companies here, and Chinese companies, they love to have big events. I've got a lot of friends in the event industry. So whether it's event companies or hosts, MCs, or designers, set designers, and they really suffered for like 6 months, right? And even now, one of my very close friends, she was in the process of signing a contract to be an MC for a very big show in July. And because of the Beijing outbreak recently, that company and that event, they're now having second thoughts about whether to put that event on now. So there are still some industries that are very, very, very fragile.
It's interesting that like metro is full of people, like clubs full of people, but they don't let cinemas work yet. The same for like big events and for festivals.
Yeah.
You know, the biggest beer event here in China was cancelled.
I think there are two elements to that. One is that there are some things that are not necessary, and I think you can argue nightclubs and things are not super necessary to people. But then at the same time, and because the government is not one entity, there's several departments to each government in each city, right? So they're all trying to promote their own sector. So there's a travel and tourism sector, there's the nightlife sector, there's a restaurant sector, and each sector wants to support its own industry. So on the 6th of June, there was this big push for more nightlife in Shanghai, partly because in the last 5 years, the city's really been sanitized. And so they want more street life culture coming back, but also because during the virus, so many small business owners in the nightlife industry got run out of business. The government is trying to promote them and their industry again. So there's the economic reality.
Yeah, and they let street vendors come out.
Yeah.
Even in Shanghai, like in downtown, you can see now guys preparing like chou tofu on the streets.
And that's great. You know, when I came traveling to China as a child, that was very much part of the street culture in the last, as I say, last 5 years. It's really been sanitized in Shanghai.
Yeah, now it's back. Not sure for how long, but now it's very wise decision from Chinese government to let people earn money however they can, because it's another thing, to the main topic, because the impact of small businesses maybe in Shanghai not that big, but for example, I have a friend, she's owner of beauty salon in Hubei, which is Anhui province capital. She like cut 6 people. She had 9 staff before outbreak, and now only 3 people. It's still not back to normal. I mean, like the life back to normal, but her services, I mean, like cutting hair is not that expensive thing. It's not margin. More expensive services for girls. Some girls' procedures on the spa, you know, and very expensive things. It's not the first necessary thing for people. And in small towns and smaller cities, even like Hefei is not small city, people lost a lot of money. They lost jobs, or even they have some savings. They don't want to spend it now because it's still a scare of a new wave. It's still very unpredictable situation between on tensions with US and the world crisis. So people don't want to spend money in the smaller cities. Shanghai is okay, yes, because people are rich here.
Okay, so then let's go into education and school. I think that's a really interesting topic. A lot of foreigners in China are here as teachers. And of course, during the virus, all offline teaching was just completely closed down, right? So they had to find new ways to teach online. And it was very interesting to see some of my friends who are at schools that are a little bit more innovative. They had already formed an online teaching system, right? So they didn't have to scramble. But the other friends, I mean, they were starting from zero. So understanding softwares, making new materials, understanding how to interact with children online, etc., etc., etc.
Many. I also have friends in Beijing who private kindergarten got bankrupt because they didn't have enough money to make it online. They was offline. Could you imagine you're just offline kindergarten and suddenly you need to have the system to teach people online? That's
out of nowhere, right? Within a matter of days.
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting transition. And actually what's really interesting is I heard from one of my friends that his offline English training center was already losing market share to online. And so you saw the news very recently about Disney English closing down. And they echoed the same sentiment. They'd already been losing customers to online because online is cheaper. You don't have to travel, and potentially it's as effective as offline. And now, because everyone who didn't believe in online teaching, they had to go through it anyway, they've seen the results in their kids. So now, even if they didn't believe in it before, they can see the results now, right? So when you talk about the new normal, it's not just about things that people do now, it's the things that people have had to do and the way it will influence how they act in the future.
I agree that it pushed many institutes and schools to work, to know how to work online, how to teach online. But at the same time, I think like in Chinese culture, again, it's very important thing is offline. Like children spend in school like a lot of time. Sometimes they live there, like to be there from early morning to like very late. They are teaching and preparing to Gaokao like from childhood. So I think it's kind of still very deep and traditional. The same like with offices. Then when the teacher is like Laoban and he needs see and control all the students,
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Actually, I've got a pretty interesting story about this. So I've got a friend called Mikal, he's an American medical student in Hangzhou. So actually the lecturer, when it all broke out, the lecturer who gave the emergency meeting about the coronavirus was actually diagnosed with it a few days later. So he had to sign a form promising to stay indoors for 14 days, report his temperature every day. But ultimately for him, he thought it was okay because he had a lot more time to do all the things that he'd never done before. He even actually made a YouTube channel called Medicine and Chill. Mm-hmm. So things are still a little bit up in the air because university hasn't started again.
Yeah.
Right. So he's kind of he's now this student with no studying to do. Or I mean,
they have classes.
He has got classes, but
online classes. Yeah.
He can't go back to his internship.
Oh, okay.
Right. He can't go back to offline classes. It's a confusing time actually, right?
About education, I think it's too early to make any conclusions because the educational year is not over yet. It will be longer this year. I mean, like my friends who doing their masters here, not here actually, they go back to their countries and now it's online courses, online exams, and it will be till the end of July. Probably. Mm-hmm. Another thing is interesting actually, people who applied for government grants here in China, they got it and they cannot come to China and they will start their online education. They never been to China and they will start online education online anyway. So maybe it's interesting tendency that you shouldn't come to China to get China a degree. And one of the last industry which suffered a lot from this coronavirus is travel for sure. And it's interesting, like we talk and now just after the Dragon Boats festival, when it was 3 days off and epidemic is almost over, and it shows that it's 50% down from last year trips on these 3 days off.
Really?
Which is, I don't know, it's bad or good, because in Chinese media outlets they say it's not bad because like it's okay.
That's
tendency.
Still pretty good, huh?
And it's the same time when Beijing outbreak and really bad weather and people still traveled. And so 50% from last year, just after like 2 months of outbreak, I think is good.
Actually, it's pretty interesting that you say that because I just spent the Dragon Boat Festival weekend in Suzhou at the W Hotel over there. I'm pretty good friends with the GM, the general manager. He told me that over this Dragon Boat Festival weekend, there are 100% occupancy. They're full, right? Full. And that's incredible because the hotel industry in Shanghai has been at 10-20%. During the virus, there were times that some hotels, there were literally at zero occupancy, right? Zero. So for this weekend to be 100%, that's incredible.
Interesting that the behavior of Chinese tourists also changed. Now it's like short distance and high-end trips gained in popularity among Chinese. They don't go far away. They're trying to get... That's why actually Suzhou was full. Yeah, because many Shanghainese people just go to Suzhou. Before they could go like abroad or like some long distance, but they want stay closer to home in case something. Sure. So it's interesting tendency. And at the same time, I think it will be back to normal next year. And maybe for inner tourism, for inbound tourism, it probably will be even higher.
For sure. Actually, I've got a foreign friend who got hired by Ctrip very recently because Ctrip is seeing the remaining foreigners in China. They're not going to be leaving China for the foreseeable future. They're going to be staying here. They're going to be traveling here. So Ctrip are trying to bulk up their English language services for foreigners in China because they know they'll be traveling more domestically. So that's a very interesting thing to see.
When we talk about the world will never be the same after coronavirus, I think in travel industry, we really see a lot of new behavior, a lot of new tendency. And I think it will be the same in the world. If you look at China, like domestic tourism in China is growing. People will travel for sure. They need to travel, but they will travel around their own countries and even like around their own cities. And it will be high-end travel because you have more money to spend. I mean, you don't need to pay very expensive air tickets and some like visa stuff, So you can spend your money for better hotel, for better services, for better food.
So I was speaking to a friend called Ed. He owns a hotel called Skywells in a very small village in a pretty rural part of China in Jiangxi, southwest China. And what he was saying is pretty interesting. One, because it's a perspective from a small village. One is also because it's from the hotel industry. So he was saying that because things always move slow there anyway, people weren't that quick to react. But once it became apparent that everything was very serious, there was no shortage of people volunteering to combat the virus, right? Particularly the older generation for whom they probably had this kind of exercise when they were younger, right, during more communist times. And it was interesting for him to see this kind of scapegoat mentality. So at the beginning, anyone from Wuhan was like literally driven out, kind of in a kind of semi-mob style. And that then evolved to foreigners as the narrative turned. In terms of the hotel, they were made to close down for 6 weeks by the government. And at the beginning of, I think, April, they started to get a few brave people, mostly locals, coming to the hotel. And then after that, it started getting busy again. One of the upsides of being in a small village meant that their connection with the local government was that much better, right? And so the local government was very willing to help guests jump through hoops.
Going back again, will the world really never be the same after coronavirus China experience? And we see the China experience show us that people can use to temperature check and some QR codes, health QR code, masks. But it's not a behavior thing. It's not that deep. To change your way of lifestyle or social distancing, all the things, or a party. I mean, online alternatives cannot replace it.
Mm-hmm.
So people are still social animals,
Mm-hmm.
and they need to go out, they need to talk to people, they want to go to restaurants and to eat, they want to travel, and I don't think it will be changed.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of a little bit after 9/11. So what happened was we started to see a lot more security checks with metro stations or trains and planes and stuff. But other than these kind of checklist things are pretty normal.
It's not new normal, it's just back to normal.
It's back to normal, but with a few added bits inside.
A bit corrected, right? Normal, but not new one.
Mm.
Updated, a bit more online, a bit more digitalized.
But I think I know what you're saying about human nature, right? Because anyway, we're social animals.
Yeah.
But I disagree with what you say on the way that business is evolving and the things that we will start to do. Right, of course we want to be social, but maybe we'll change the ways that we do stuff. So I really believe that online teaching is the future, because it was future anyway. It was the future anyway, but it got catalyzed, right? Yeah. So all these things that maybe companies put on the back burner, some of the stuff that we put on the back burner, we're like, oh, we'll do that later when we get time to it. We did have time for it.
The same for tourism. It was a very obvious tendency that people want to travel alone, not in the groups. Even for Chinese market, they love to travel in the groups, but more and more young Chinese people, they prefer travel alone by themselves. So, and again, coronavirus catalyzed this, and more people will choose ecotourism. They will not go to this group attractions. So just to stay alone.
Do I agree with that? I don't think I do.
I don't know.
I
mean,
know,
like they say, it was tendency again, that like tourism going more individual. Just coronavirus speed up the tendency in many industries to be more personal.
Yeah. In my perspectives, the coronavirus catalyzed things that were going to be happening anyway.
Yeah.
Right. It pushed everything forward onto more digital ways. And I think a lot of people will understand this parallel that I'll make as well to the 2008 economic crisis, is that once again, we see that governments and big companies, they're not these huge, infallible machines.
Yeah.
They have their own weaknesses. They have aspects that they can't control. It actually really reveals the fragility of society and the systems that we rely on. And that's really my big takeaway from the coronavirus, is that nothing is as solid as it seems.
My big takeaway about all these things, and I'm really tired to talk about coronavirus. It's really too much. And I think even our today episodes is a bit not that good as we expected, because like it's too much coronavirus everywhere. And the special thing that I work in media industry, and we wrote so much about coronavirus, so I cannot handle it anymore. And it's, for me, it's very, like really, I don't know how to say, when you eat a lot of
the same food. And I think that's
the same. Over much coronavirus that for me it's not interesting.
Well,
it's obvious.
Of course,
it's not interesting for me. I'm sorry for people who listen to us. Maybe it was not that like fully. I don't know how to say it.
But I think that's a really interesting reaction, because that's probably how actually people all across the world feel.
I hope
right?
so.
And so like people in England, people in America who are like,
why we do this episode about coronavirus? No one wants to listen about
it's like
coronavirus.
People in England and America who are like, who, very famously on the news, they're still going out to beaches and parties and stuff, right? They're like, I've heard about this news so much, I don't care anymore. Like my little brother, who's very smart, he's kind of like, he was joking with my mum. He was like, I just want to get the virus and then get immunity and then be done with it. I'm so sick and tired of hearing this. I just want to get it and then I don't have to worry about it ever again.
So no,
right? It's that kind of mentality of like this information overload that you're just like, just get it done with. So I think ultimately this is a topic that I think is very important for us as people living in China, that we have this oral history of what happened in China.
Yeah.
Right. Because even though it's not that interesting now, because there's been so much stuff about it, it's very interesting.
For my grandson, back to history.
It's necessary to have this. And now we've heard about how we've both come through the virus. At the end of every episode, we like to recommend some content that's very relevant to China. And as we've been talking about having all the spare time and doing things that we wanted to get done, Artem and his friend have been filming a series. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we got this time to do we call it vlogumentary, kind of series about human face of China, unknown China. This time is about Jingning Autonomous County, which is in Zhejiang province. We went there, we talked to local people, we understand how the local businesses works, we understand the local culture, and share it with the people, with audience. So I will put the link, you can watch it on YouTube, yeah.
So I watched the pilot episode, and I think it's fantastic. Actually, what was really interesting for me was how good the feedback was from the local viewers, right? So it's a group of foreigners, basically, who go to explore hidden parts of China. And you guys were number 2 on Weibo, which is Chinese Twitter's...
Weibo video travel.
Yeah, for the travel category for that day. And I think that's pretty cool that Chinese people would be so accepting of seeing their own country through the eyes of foreigners, right? Of course, you're very interested in China, you're very knowledgeable about it, but it's still a different perspective, right? I think that's really cool.
And originally, it was for foreigners, actually, more on YouTube, but then we also posted on Chinese platforms, which is, again, about coronavirus. We planned it before outbreak, so people can come to China to see different China, not only Shanghai, Beijing, and Great Wall. But now it's explore that places which even Chinese people don't know. And for them, it's interesting because they now choosing somewhere to travel inside their own country. Yeah, I will put the link in description. And tell us maybe in our social media, we will put our LinkedIn and our Instagram, what the next topic you want to hear about. Because actually we didn't choose the next topic yet.
Okay, thank you everyone so much for listening. This is Lucien.
And I'm Artem.
And we are Young China.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Oh my God, this was...